Next question comes from my friend Ed, and the question is, what does it mean when the dying see people that are no longer there? I'm really talking about the experience that oftentimes people who are dying will have visions of people that have died already, or will be greeted by people who have already died, members of their family or close friends or what have you. Sometimes the phenomenon is that maybe deities or sort of spiritual figures will also appear to the person as they're dying. And most of the medical system has um, stated that these are caused due to hallucinations or delirium. Oftentimes, the dying are sedated because it is seen that any of these types of visions sometimes get labeled as delirium, and therefore are the dying are medicated because it's not always an easy thing that happens for the person who's dying to be able to have those visions, but more so it's sometimes it impacts the family, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a negative way. There has been a number of different books that have been written about this kind of phenomenon. One was written by Maggie Callanan. The book is called Final Gifts, and in it, she really talks about the secret language of the dying, um, and oftentimes the dying might have language around packing up or building a house or moving on or needing to go on a journey or travel. I remember one of my own patients that I care for in the community. He had died suddenly from a pulmonary embolism, but the language in those moments of dying was all about, I have to go, I got to get going. um, and and so I, as a young nurse, wasn't quite sure what to do with this, and it did create a bit of confusion or a bit of sort of disruption, because I, as well as potentially my patient's wife, anticipated that his death would be slow because he was dying of cancer. We knew the risk of being able to have radiation and how it might impact his veins, and that there was a risk for having a pulmonary embolism, but it's not necessarily that we were prepared for it, nor were we prepared for this particular language that he was using, and weren't sure how to be able to comfort him. So medication is oftentimes used because it's an uncomfortable state people are in. The other really good resource is there has been some work done in Alberta, and I have a presentation on Deathbed Phenomenon. So in 2011, there was some research that was actually done, and what these nurses found was that people do have visions, that it is not because of hallucinations or delirium. It is not because they are medicated, and many of them, pain medication may cause some hallucinations or what have you. But they had done the research and really found that this was not the case, that there was something very common about these type of visions and this type of language. And so, going back to Ed's question, what does it mean when dying people see people that have already died, or maybe see some of these spiritual deities or guides? And I guess you can look at it in all kinds of different ways. But if we are able to educate the families and normalize this process, that is something that might happen as a way of potentially comforting the person who's dying. I think that there is part of that it is comforting, that if I'm dying myself, it would be great if I see my grandmother and those folks. It soothes my own discomfort maybe in the process of dying. And there's also the potential that there is another reality that we're actually not being able to see, because we live in this physical world abiding by these natural laws. And so we don't oftentimes see these kinds of things, where somebody who's dying may have more access to stimulation that's coming from different sources, different realities. People have had these kinds of experiences when they're using hallucinogenic drugs or those kinds of things. And that might be what might be happening. We still don't know very much about consciousness, and certainly don't know as to what happens to consciousness or what the impact of consciousness is on dying. So the meaning of those visions is really dependent on the person who's dying and their family and what they think those meanings mean. I think if it gives them comfort, then that's good. That way there can be some level of comfort in the process of dying. Thank you, Ed, for that question.